All right, hey, my name is Matthew Cook, and I'm doing my final ethnographic story on the skate club here at Appalachian State. Now, that's specifically um, geared towards downhill skating. They do include normal street skating as well, but it's pretty much exclusively downhill, like fast longboarding. So, yeah, here we go. The skate club here at ASU is young and thriving. Its start dates back to the beginning of the school year in 2021, August to be exact, with now over 100 members in the GroupMe and almost 1,000 subscribers on their Instagram page. This is no small feat. The ski team, which I'm a part of, has lower numbers of both, and we've existed before even mobile phones. This has made their presence prominent and thriving in this baby stage. Sean, the skate club's president, shared with me about how he used to just skate around campus with his roommate, and they just decided to start the club. Sean had experience from the Solar Car team where he ran social media and had some other responsibilities, so he was able to assume the role of president fairly easily. Sean is a fairly conscientious and intentional person. He can even seem relatively timid compared to the other skaters, but I would say that he is certainly not. His interesting ability to balance between extreme and cautious has made him the perfect fit to run this club. He has all the passion and drive, but also not overly concerned with simply skating. There are many people who could not run events like him simply because they'd be more concerned with skating the event than they would be actually coordinating and adapting for it. And a quote, Sean, I wasn't super stoked on it at first. I've always been a pretty risk-adverse guy, which I think is an important component. When you're doing something like starting a club like this, you don't obviously want to be the most send-it person in the world. Then, you don't want to, we need those people for the club because then, it's cool and it's fun. But those people shouldn't be planning events because, it's better to err on the side of caution and safety. I've noticed his care firsthand, which is even present at the small sliding clinics that I've attended. He spent so much time just explaining sliding techniques and having us run little drills. Sliding is a crazy balance where you push the board out from underneath you so that you can control speed and corner at tighter turns. It's basically your control. It is terrifying and not intuitive in the slightest. Sean is the one who enforces helmets on the hill and is looking out for cars as well as collisions between the several skaters on the hill. One of my runs, I decided just to ride it out rather than just practicing my slide because I was getting frustrated. And he was peeking out over the side of the hill watching me run it out because you can only really gain speed going downhill, and my minimal longboarding experience is the only reason I was able to control that situation. He was visibly nervous for me and my safety on that run. Sean has taken a strong mantle of the ship that is the skate club, but he was also graced with a beautiful boat to take command of. The first skate meetup they coordinated was surprised by the appearance of several established skaters who already lived in the Boone area and had been skating for several years. Sean mentioned two individuals that I had met, Co and Pat Daughtery. I had interviewed Pat first because I knew him through a friend of a friend. Pat commands an absolute wealth of knowledge about the sport, and he's definitely in the top downhill skaters on this side of the country, but you wouldn't immediately assume that from talking to him. In talking with him, it slowly dawned on me that this guy was obviously much better at this than he was willing to directly claim. His knowledge of skating is just so extensive, detailed, and passionate. He started by sharing the history of downhill, which started as late as 2009, and actually capitalized on the housing market crash. The amount of housing that they were trying to build left an abundance of abandoned roads with insane grades, meaning steepness, in complete isolation because they were intended to be neighborhood roads. Specifically, Boone was the mecca for downhill this side of the Mississippi for the first few years before it became Asheville. Pat was not graced with the glorious early days in the same way as Sean. He started when he lived in the west side of Maryland, and he described that what used to be considered a massive hill to him, as such a small starting point now. And shortly after that, he moved to Boston for all of high school. So he considered himself a flatland skater, and he described this benefit. Pat. Right, so of course I was like one of those people who was kind of from flatland, and I feel like flatland longboarders are often like more determined because they have to travel to find hills. So they're like always practicing on flat ground and get their form down really good. So by the time they say move to somewhere where there's mountains, they have this really good foundation of the skill. So by the time Pat was living in Boston, he had a decent foundation, but to find any remotely fun hills, he had to travel 3 hours to the mountains of West Maryland just to skate once a month. This strikes me as another deciding factor on what makes the difference between the casual and serious skaters. I don't want this to sound like something like you have to be dedicated and push yourself and you have to love it even when you hate it, because that may be the message, but most people can't just create that. Rather than looking at it as a grind, it is a beauty of pure passion. It is not what you need to do, it is what you want to do. The hard work is not the standard, but the byproduct, because it has always been just about skating for Pat. And it has paid off. It sounds like he can regularly hit highway speeds. Sean has described it as an art form to witness, like a dance. But he plays a much more dangerous flow and makes it look just as beautiful. He's living on a razor-thin edge, which he has been cut by so many times that it is of little concern to him at this point. Pat is incredibly humble. He could boast about his gear sponsorship, but he would rather gloss over it and almost throw it aside. Pat. So yeah, I had a couple buddies that were sponsored by Powell, and then just over time I ended up getting flow from them too. And I just get gear from them pretty consistently. Yeah, that's pretty sweet, that's what I said. And then, yeah, them and land yachts. I'm fairly certain that him saying I ended up getting flow from them too was a way to shift responsibility from himself and act humbly. He's able to make it sound like getting free gear from the most prominent downhill companies wasn't a big deal. People like Pat and Co. were able to bring such a strong community for the club to build off of. Combine that with the leadership from Sean, and it created the most fertile ground for new skaters like Dom, who I did my third interview with. I met him during the sliding clinics, which he was hosting near the State Farm parking lot in Boone. If you go past the parking lot there, you'll find a little park and then a field hockey field. The road that connects the park to the field has a mild grade and 2 gradual turns, which is a beautiful start for skaters. At State Farm, there were always just 2 groups in my mind, the beginners, like myself, and the established skaters. The distinction was basically divided by if you could start from the top of State Farm or not. Dom was quick to separate himself from some of the other skaters that he would ride down with, almost minimizing his own ability to conquer that hill. Dom. After, practicing a bunch of heel-side and toe-side slides and, the snow finally melting away, I started skating with, Rob and Co. and Nathan a bunch. They brought me to a bunch of different places, and they were really helpful. Hey, you should probably work on this, or hey, you should work on this. It feels shitty to say to people that are going out there for the first time, but, that corner, State Farm, isn't necessarily all that challenging. Dom himself has only started back in January of this year, but he had struck me as such an established skater that this was shocking to me. He has definitely done the time to validate his ability, far beyond any type of beginner. He knew Sean, who had tried to get him out last fall semester, and in December he was finally free enough to join. But after that first run skating, he had no issue finding time for more, because he'd had so much fun. It could have been difficult to try and pick up in January because the hills are covered in snow and ice, but that didn't stop him. He immediately demonstrated one of those inherent drives and commitments that produce the passionate skater he currently is. Dom. So we couldn't really skate all that much, but I found, that one road that leads down to the State Farm lot, the small hill that takes a left right by the Plus gas station. Yeah. I went there because that was the only road that didn't have snow on it, and it didn't have salt on it. And just practice slides for hours at a time by myself. Matt. Well, there you go. That's some dedication right there, because I get frustrated after just a few little bursts of it, This dedication and repetition has led Dom to being immensely knowledgeable about the specific application of form and the rest of the physics that go into skating, such as board composition, truck style, and wheel compositions. He told me that even just the color of the wheel changes how hard it is and how it wants to slide, and that those differences are small and yet noticeable. I was actually pointed to Dom by Sean specifically because of his attention to detail and form. He could tell you exactly where you want your feet and why. That specific degree of form can be a little subjective when it comes to actual effect, because no one's first slide is perfect in form, but his perspective was super helpful to me because it breaks down how the motion is executed and what you are aiming for in application. I think a large part of learning sports like this is to get your muscles to move in ways they don't want to naturally, in order to cultivate self-trust and muscle memory. Every fiber of your body wants to sink your weight back and just reach your hand out a little bit to slide, but you need 90% of your weight on that front foot most of the time, and the most weight that should get shifted is onto that sliding hand, and that is twice as scary. Your weight needs to be forward because that puts the weight on the leading trucks, which inherently control your steering. I have physically felt the difference, being mid-turn, remembering to stomp your front foot down, and you will feel the command of the board change entirely, but it takes hours of practice to leave far behind, and I was never fully able to do so. So yeah, that's been I capped out on my word count, but that's been my experience with the skate club, and I want to show you guys a video too. I think I chose this one. This is my man Dom. That's him on his racing board. That was Sean right there too. And that's the State Farm hill that we were going to, as well as this. This is Co. And followed by Dom again, I believe. Yes. But yeah, my time with them was just fascinating and invigorating. The community was so welcoming and so well established. I really was super grateful to have this time to have a reason to like just involve myself so deeply in something like this. And thank you, Dr. Patty, for a class that inspires and allows for something like this. Thank you.